What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another video, and in today's video we're continuing on my series of Lilo and Stitch reviews with Stitch the movie. Coming out in 2003 and directed by people like Tony Craig and Bob's Gannaway, this film once again stars people like Daveigh Chase, Chris Sanders, Tia Carrere, Ving Rhames, Kevin McDonald, D. Bradley Baker, Rob Paulsen, and the list goes on and on. Before we get too far into this, I'd like to welcome you all here to the channel and say a big thanks to my guest here in this video, and that is the one and only Tajaya of BLACKTASTIC Media. We covered the original Lilo and Stitch here on the channel not too long ago, but a decent bit ago at this point. And just for anybody who didn't see that video, BLACKTASTIC was not a huge fan of the movie, but he liked parts of the movie for sure. There was definitely things that he had that were highlights, but he wasn't crazy about the film, whereas I grew up with Lilo and Stitch and even have the character of Stitch tattooed on my leg, and I love that movie. It's one of my childhood favorites, and it was a great time going back and revisiting that film. So today we're talking about the next film in the franchise, which funny enough is not Lilo and Stitch 2, which does exist, and we will likely be talking about it here on the channel, but instead is Stitch the movie, that is only about an hour and 5 minutes long, and actually is a straight to Disney Channel follow-up that follows up the events of the original Lilo and Stitch, but most notably sets up the animated TV show that would air on Disney Channel. Now, I thought that this was an interesting movie to just be able to watch on its own without having to watch that show for BLACKTASTIC. Moving forward, there is one more movie that is connected to the TV show itself, and that is Leroy and Stitch, and I will not be asking BLACKTASTIC to watch the entirety of the series and watch Leroy and Stitch with me, so I'll probably be covering those on my own, but we can expect to see BLACKTASTIC come back for Lilo and Stitch 2, Stitch Has the Glitch. Without further ado, I actually want to go ahead and pass the floor over to BLACKTASTIC Media now, and we'll go back to my thoughts in just a moment.
What's up? Stitch the movie. Normally, this is where I beat up Anthony Perez verbally about sending me these Disney joints, but dude, I actually really thought this movie was cute, very watchable. In fact, I think even rewatchable, in my opinion. I dug this movie. Maybe because the first movie broke me in with this universe, this world of Lilo, Stitch, Hawaii, space. The first movie I just couldn't really grasp and gravitate towards. A lot of characters got on my nerve. Lilo is still a lot to swallow, but she's enduring. Stitch, the more he talks, the more of his personality comes out, and you know, he got cuter to me. I like the MacGuffin, this ball full of experiments. And homeboy from part one, they sent him on a mission, brought in this new dude, this hamster, rabbit looking dude with red eyes. He was kind of funny. And the cool thing was to see that these experiments are all similar in design, and they all look like Stitch. I thought that was cool. And the main one was the electric eel thing. I thought, oh, excuse me, that was a really, really cool character. I'm like, I'm finding myself invested in this movie. I was surprised, man. Pleasantly surprised. It might not be a popular opinion, but I enjoy this one more than Lilo and Stitch, the original movie. All the characters from part one are back in this one in some capacity or other. And I'm like, oh, I remember them. I remember those little kids and little bastards. I brought my man Cobra back, the black dude, which is my favorite character. And I'm like, Now, the two aliens that stayed on Earth from last movie, the husky dude with the 4 eyeballs and that skinny thing with the 1 eyeball. Is that skinny thing a female? Because he's always wearing wigs and dressing like females, but it has like a male voice. Is it both? Is it a shim? Is it a she, he? But I don't know. That alien is pretty damn funny. When he got locked in that chest and jumped out and said, breathe, then talk. I thought that was funny. But I don't know what his capacity is as sexuality. He is always dressed in women's clothes. He's wearing, Lilo's sister's clothes. So I don't know what that's all about. But it's funny. I love the space battle. I thought that was very enjoyable. And again, the animation style, I love it. Again, it reminds me of that 90s show, Futurama. The way the ships are designed, the way they move. It just looks like Futurama. But the Elvis song in the beginning was fitting. And it actually fit. I like the Elvis song at the intro of this movie. Man, it was just energetic. And the runtime was short. I ain't gonna lie. When I started the movie, I paused it to see how long it was. I was like, oh, okay, I think I can sit through this. And I had my arms crossed, had my lips turned up. Like, oh, here we go again. Fucking Anthony A. Perez. Yo, dude, you surprised me. I actually thought this movie was cute. I can see myself watching this one again. I dug it. You won me over, homeboy. You did the damn thing. So I'm going to turn it over to my man Perez. Hey, man, good choice. You caught me off guard with this one, but you always catch me off guard. Whether it was good or bad, it's always the journey that I appreciate. Till next time, brother. Peace. Yeah, I dug it.
A big thanks to Tajaya of BLACKTASTIC Media for joining me here in yet another video. As usual, you can find the link to any of my guests down below in the description box. Go give them some love, let them know I sent you, and I'm happy to see that you enjoyed this one a lot more. And it's probably what you mentioned, where you already were kind of put into this universe with the first film, and even if there were things you weren't crazy about with that first film, you found yourself enjoying more as you spent more time with these characters. I was a little worried that you weren't going to be too into this movie, as it is a little bit more goofy than I think the original film, because it definitely has more of that Disney Channel vibe. But I am happy to see that you enjoyed it, and I'd argue that you probably would enjoy the original Lilo and Stitch a little bit more going back in retrospect. We have one more I'd love BLACKTASTIC to join me for, and that is Lilo and Stitch 2, Stitch Has a Glitch. We'll be doing that at some point in the future, but a big thanks once again to BLACKTASTIC for joining me here, and I'm very happy to see that you enjoyed this one a lot more. So as I mentioned, Stitch the movie is a film that is setting up the TV show for Lilo and Stitch that would be on Disney Channel that is currently available to watch on Disney Plus. And yeah, that was a series I loved growing up as a kid. It was the one that really honed in on the fact that there are a bunch of other experiments just like Stitch. For anybody who is not familiar with Lilo and Stitch or Stitch, Stitch is experiment 626, and there are 625 that came before him. And so this movie introduces us to the fact that those exist. They're being held in some sort of capsule, and if they get wet, they look like little balls. If they get wet, they end up becoming a full-fledged experiment. They come to life. And so in this film, you have Captain Gantu from the first film being sent on a brand new mission to try to get his hands on the rest of these experiments for his new boss, Dr. Hamsterville, who has a bit of a rivalry with one of the people who would stay on Earth with Lilo and Stitch. And that is the character of Jumbo, who also stayed back there with Pleakley, and they end up having a little bit of a family dynamic with Lilo, Stitch, Nani, and the rest of the gang. And so yeah, Gantu's been sent to go and get these experiments from Jumbo, and also to kidnap Jumbo himself. And in the mix of all this, Lilo and Stitch must work together to try to stop Captain Gantu from getting Jumbo and the rest of the experiments, because they realize that the rest of the experiments are Stitch's family, and they realize that family is the most important thing. And that's something I've always enjoyed about these films, and specifically the first film, is that it really hones into the idea of family. And what I love about that first film is that it really hones into the idea that family isn't just blood. You can have family that's completely unorthodox, that's a mess, that have different people from different races, different ages, you know, guys, girls, whatever the case may be, and have it really feel like a unit in a family. And what's great about that movie and this film is it really hones in on the idea that you have this big, dysfunctional, weird family that ultimately all loves one another. And I've always just really enjoyed the central theme of family in these movies. Now, I think without a doubt, since I mentioned that it did go to Disney Channel, there are going to be some negatives in comparison to the theatrically released Lilo and Stitch. And so I think for sure one of the biggest and most notable things is the fact that the budget is definitely lower here. This would be far more in line with the budget and animation style that we would see in the animated show, which, you know, still has that charm of the late 90s, early 2000s hand-drawn animation. I really enjoy that about this film, the show, and the original film, and anything else really they've done with Lilo and Stitch up to this point. We do have a live action Lilo and Stitch film coming at some point, but for now we have these animated films that still harken back to 2D animation, which for me is my favorite animation. So going back and revisiting this film, even though it does have lesser animation than the original film, I still enjoyed seeing it, but I feel it was at least worth mentioning. At the end of the day, this is a movie that's setting up the TV show, as I mentioned, and the big thing that it's really setting up is at the very end of this movie, all of the experiments are saved from Dr. Hamsterville, who is the main villain of the animated show, and they end up actually raining all over Hawaii, the area that Lilo and Stitch live in, which is super convenient. It's pretty funny in this movie. They go to space on multiple occasions, sometimes crash landing back down to Earth, and every time they fall back down to Earth, even if they were in a huge space battle, even if they were far into the reaches of space, they'd always land perfectly right back on Hawaii, which is part of the charm and cheese of this film. There's a lot of very convenient things in the storytelling here that are definitely just part of, you know, leading into a very silly, straightforward, kid-friendly kind of story. It's something that's definitely not trying to be a super well-written film with a lot of layers and depth. In comparison to the first film, it definitely dumbs down its writing, in my opinion, but I think it's still a cute, fun time, even if it does have convenience. I do think that for the most part, it knows what it is and it has fun with that. And as I was just mentioning, all of these experiments rain down on Hawaii, and that is the base premise of the show. Over the course of the show, episode by episode, Lilo and Stitch will go out and try to discover, or they would end up uncovering, some of these other experiments, and they'd either have to capture them and try to keep them away from humanity because they're too dangerous, or try to befriend them and try to find some purpose for them in order to actually find peace and happiness in their life. In the case of this film, we center on specifically an electricity-wielding experiment who goes by the name Sparky by the time we get to the end of the film. And throughout the course of the film, he's just causing mayhem, blowing up light bulbs, blowing up power generators, and just, you know, taking the energy out of people's homes, and just being chaotic in every single way that you could possibly think that he could be. And then at the very end, they end up finding a home and a purpose for him, having him be the one who actually powers the lighthouse that hadn't been powered up on this island of Hawaii. And so it's pretty great because over the course of the show, as they do meet these various experiments that have different abilities, they would end up finding different homes, places, and friends for them that would allow their abilities to be utilized to help those around them and kind of have them feel like a big part of their family. And so I really enjoy that message across this entirety of this series. It was nice to go back and rewatch this movie. I probably hadn't seen this since it originally came out when I was a kid. I watched plenty of the TV show, including a lot of reruns of the TV show when I was growing up as a kid. So I'm actually excited to dive into that at some point in the future. But for now, we're talking about Stitch the movie. On its own, I think it's a cute movie. It does leave things open-ended, but if you do go into the show, I think there's plenty to enjoy there. I don't know that, again, Blacktastic's gonna be running to go and watch the animated show, but I'm glad to hear you enjoyed the film a lot more, man. I'm very happy to have you on the channel once again, and I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts on the proper sequel, Lilo and Stitch 2, Stitch Has a Glitch, which will be coming to the channel soon enough. A big thanks to you guys. I'm gonna keep this short and brief. This was a good time. I definitely wanna hear what you guys have to say. Do you like this movie? Do you not like this movie? Do you think it was a poor follow-up to the original Lilo and Stitch? Or do you like the way that this set up the animated show as I do? Again, a big thanks to Blacktastic for joining me. The link to his channel is down below in the description box, and I'll go ahead and leave it right here. A big thanks to you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.